They then head down to the basement, where his father reminds him that he used to love coming down there when he was young. He would always punish Ferlin for coming here not because he wanted to be harsh, but because the space contains valuable treasures from their ancestors. Ferlin looks at the stones and asks if they are all stones of divine punishment. As he surveys the basement, he notices boxes scattered everywhere and stones of divine punishment all around, which leads him to wonder if the Eltec family has always been this wealthy. Now he's pretty sure that the treasure map he gave to the prince also came from the basement. That's when the old man opens one of the boxes, revealing a ton of magical stones. He explains that every time he sees these stones, he remembers the grim stories passed down by their ancestors. He tells Ferlin that these are valuable stones that only witches can use. According to family lore, their family was founded under the protection of a witch. The first Eltec didn't come from the western region. Rather, they came over the mountains from the wastelands, where witches had built a vast kingdom. But they were attacked by devils from the underworld, and the surviving witches and people fled wherever they could. The founder of their family is a witch named Agatha. She led a group to the stone tower in the misty forest to collect her research, while the rest followed the masses to Grey Castle. He explains that their ancestors were among them, and he was Miss Agatha's butler, who should have gone to the forest with her but faltered and suggested looking after their supplies instead. The witch agreed to his request, but all butlers live and die with their masters, so his actions were no different from betrayal. As a result, he carried his regrets with him when he arrived in the western region. He says the witch never returned, and he severed all ties with the Alliance. Later, he took a few servants and settled in this area, away from the survivors. Ferlin asks if this means his father knew the church was evil from the beginning. The father agrees, saying he was powerless to do anything about it. If any witches appeared in their territory, he would hide them, but he couldn't do anything about the witches in the fortress. His beliefs are different from Duke Rayan's, who hated witches even more than the church did. He mentions that from the last pages of their ancestors' record, they did the same thing, which was hiding witches. Ferlin then asks what makes his father think Agatha might be alive. The father explains that it's only a possibility since witches have many different abilities, but they're unable to have children. That's why it's just an educated guess. He adds that the ancestor wished his descendants would explore the misty forest tower. He notes that his writing is smudged from the passage of time, but his remorse can still be felt with every stroke. Ferlin then asks him if he doesn't want to see Agatha, to which the father replies that there's no need to contact her for now. He states that ancestors don't visit their descendants. Rather, the descendants should seek out their ancestors. He gives Ferlin permission to bring all of the stones with him, saying that if Agatha is indeed who they think she is, then their ancestors' wish will be fulfilled. The scene then transitions to Border Town, where Prince Roland seems to be working on something new. He announces that anyone who guesses correctly will get an extra serving of ice cream bread. The girls perk up at the mention and start drooling right away. Ash then nonchalantly asks if this provides running water for the room, to which Andrea laughs inwardly, thinking how ridiculous her assumption is. Nightingale also chimes in, stating that this is a crude assumption since typical plumbing doesn't require such a huge pipe, and that Prince isn't inefficient. Andrea perks up to see that Nightingale is thinking along similar lines. Not only that, but Nightingale is also good at combat and has an elite background, and even their hair colors are similar. She has the most elite attitude in the entire Witch Union, and more importantly, she hates Ash. Andrea has no clue why that is the case, but she's sure that the enemy of her enemy is her best friend, which makes Nightingale interesting to her. Ash then asks Nightingale how she can be so sure about her claim, to which Nightingale slips out that she watched Prince draw the blueprints in his office, and saw everything he did. The other witches protest, claiming that this is unfair, so Prince declares that Nightingale is out of the game. He then decides to drop a hint, and states that these pipes are only a part of a whole system. He then tells them to visit other rooms, as it will make it easier to understand the whole system. Lightning and Maggie decide to explore the other rooms, while Andrea leans closer to Nightingale, asking about what Prince is actually making. She promises to share half of her bread if she wins, but Nightingale responds that she doesn't understand most of it, as the technical stuff sounds like gibberish to her. She adds that Anna is probably the only one who can understand Prince's blueprints just by looking at them, and if she asks her, she will definitely have the answer. It seems that Andrea is hesitant to talk to Anna, and decides to just figure things out by herself. She examines the copper pipes installed and notices that they're insulated with metal sheets, likely to prevent direct contact with them. She wonders why they need insulation, considering only a barbarian like Ash would be able to damage these pipes. Then, she looks outside at the large hot water facility where all the pipes are leading. But this just makes her even more confused as she has no clue why the pipes are only transferring hot water. Prince finally announces that from this point onward, the castle's heating system is officially ready to be used. This revelation surprises Ash, while Prince explains that after hot water boils in the stove, steam will travel through the pipes into their rooms with diffusers. As long as the doors and windows are closed, the rooms will quickly heat up. Now they can enjoy springtime warmth while they sleep. And once he perfects the system, he plans to start building them in private residences too. Little Nana feels so warm and cozy that she doesn't even want to go home. Prince then reveals that besides Anna, Soraya, Hummingbird, there is another person who will receive the extra ice cream bread for guessing. And as you can imagine, Tilly will be the lucky winner to have some ice bread who guessed correctly. The next scene transitions to a science seminar hosted by Prince, where he plans to give a lesson on nitrogen extraction. Without diving into the technical details, what's clear is that this process is only possible thanks to Agatha's freezing abilities and Kyle Sichi's efforts. Prince is surprised to see how well Sichi and Agatha are getting along. He initially had thought their blunt personalities would clash and cause chaos in the laboratory. Agatha starts using her magic to cool down the canister, and nitrogen begins to emerge from the nozzle. Anna stands by, melting any ice that forms to keep the process smooth. Kyle Sichi brings out a glass jar that contains the nitrogen, but Lily mentions that she can't see anything. This prompts Prince to ask his first question, which is how can they prove that this gas is different from oxygen? 3 students immediately step up with answers. The first one is Princess Tilly, then Agatha, and lastly, it's Anna. After giving their thorough answers, the 3 women smirk at each other, acknowledging each other's intellect while also showing a subtle competitive tension, as if they are quietly competing to outshine one another. Prince couldn't help but feel proud of the top students. Meanwhile, the less academically inclined ones were clearly struggling to grasp the concepts. Even Barov had no idea what kind of sorcery is this. He turned to Iron Axe, asking if he understood anything, to which Iron Axe replies that he has no clue what is going on, but he sure knows that this all sounds cool to hear. With nitrogen now secured, Prince is thinking ahead to producing nitric oxide, key for making nitric acid, and he knows Anna's skills will be critical in this process. The scene shifts to the town wall, where soldiers are dutifully keeping watch. One of them points out that the witches have arrived, and as they look, they can't help but marvel at how beautiful the witches are. It's a far cry from what the church had led them to believe, and they fed everyone that witches were ugly and terrifying monsters. Right at that moment, they notice some commotion, and as we get a closer look, we spot this giant hybrid monster along with other demon monsters too. The soldiers start to panic, wondering if it's an underworld devil, and they're sure their rifles are just as good as water pistols against this behemoth. Only an artillery team could stop it. With the speak of the devil, the artillery shows up and quickly fires a shell, but it misses its mark, and the monsters keep marching toward the wall. The soldiers decide to shoot the demons within their range, while Ash and Andrea step forward to take the monster head-on. The soldiers glance at the witches, wondering if their magic can even take down those monsters. But before anyone can do anything else, everyone's shocked as a booming voice rings out, and a shell pierces through the big monster's chest, killing the big sucker with just one hit. Some soldiers are absolutely thrilled, while others are left in awe. But pretty soon, they all start hugging each other, celebrating the fact that they literally just took down a devil from the underworld. They all praise the prince while the witches smile, seeing how effortlessly the victory was achieved, all thanks to the prince. Agatha, on the other hand, is losing her bananas as well. She can barely believe that this weapon took down an underworld terror beast with just one hit. The prince then asks if that's the name of this hybrid demon, and further asks her if she has seen these in the Fertile Lands as well. Agatha confirms she has definitely seen them before, because they used to spawn in packs. They're incredibly tough for witches to defeat, and even devils struggle against these monstrosities. Many cities and towns were raided by these beasts, but they only appear during the months of demons. She goes on to explain that the arrival of the red moon is when magic is at its peak, and many witches are born during that time. Devils and demons also grow especially powerful then. Agatha adds that she closely studied the history books he gave her, and she calculated that humans should have at least 20 to 50 years until the next red moon, so it's impossible for this monster to appear now. But the prince points out that the monster did appear, asking what that means. Agatha grimly responds that it only means we don't have much time left. She reveals they only have 5 years at best. The prince snickers at this, and Agatha asks if he really thinks that's enough time to prepare. She explains that this pattern held true during the First and Second Divine Wars, but now, time seems to be shrinking, and it could get even worse in the future. He explains that the reason he was snickering is because he thought the red moon would arrive early, maybe even this winter. But according to his 5-year plan, by then, their population and resources will be at a decent level, their tactics will improve, and if they fail in battle, they'll have a retreat strategy to ensure survival. His most important goal right now is to build 2 to 3 industrial cities, grow their population, and sustain their army's firepower, food, and supplies. He emphasizes that people are the heart of their supplies, so boosting education and employment is essential. If they can fill the entire wall with weapons like the one that took down the monster, they might just be able to stop the devils. Agatha then says she finally understands why she is working in the lab. Apparently, she has been contributing in work related to producing cannons. She promises to do her best to provide distilled nitrogen and oxygen as long as the prince can defeat the devils. To this, the prince confidently assures her not to worry. They will definitely win against the devils. As night settles in, we see all the witches gathered around, playing cards, a game the prince recently introduced. It looks like Ash is having a rough time. She keeps losing over and over, which is driving her nuts. They ask Evelyn if she wants to join in, and she asks what the game is about. Andrea explains that it's a gambling game where the person with the most slips on their face wins, and the loser has to give up their ice cream. Evelyn raises an eyebrow and points out that finals are coming up, so why aren't they studying? Andrea shrugs, saying the foundational classes are pretty easy, and she's confident she can ace them without studying a single word. This doesn't surprise Evelyn, considering Andrea is one of the elites, so she has way more knowledge than the average person. Evelyn starts feeling inadequate, thinking about how even Ash and Shavi already know how to read and write while she feels like she herself is at the bottom of the barrel. Evelyn tells them she can't play cards because she needs to study, so they should go ahead and have fun without her. The 3 ladies are confused about what's gotten into her but agree and let her be. Andrea quickly dives back into the game, and they spend the night having fun. The next day arrives, and the first thing we see is Andrea in the examination hall, feeling quite relaxed. She's excited that after today's exam, the first section of their studies will be over, and everyone will get ice cream bread as a celebration. Andrea is especially looking forward to taking Ash's and Shavi's share since they lost to her multiple times in the card game. She can't help but smirk, imagining them handing over their cakes to her. Lady Scroll distributes the exam papers to everyone, and as soon as the test starts, Andrea starts breezing through it, while Ash is startled that the test has started already. As Evelyn struggles with the exam questions, Andrea confidently finishes the first sheet. But when she flips the paper over, she's immediately hit by unexpected questions she never anticipated. All of these dots and lines do not make sense to her at all. She then suddenly remembers that Nightingale is also an elite witch, so she must know the answers. Andrea sneaks a glance at Nightingale, only to be met with a clueless expression. Now even more nervous, Andrea looks over at Evelyn, who is also trying her best to solve these problems. Maggie also seems to know what she's doing. Then she looks over at Ash, and, not surprisingly, Ash is struggling just as much as she is with these baffling questions. Looks like Andrea is totally screwed with this exam. Later, Lady Scroll collects all the tests and brings them to the prince. The prince smiles as he checks the papers, thinking about how fun it can be sometimes. He enjoys seeing the variety of weird answers students come up with, and he can almost feel their pain and anxiety through their writing. Suddenly, Nightingale pops in, demanding to know why Anna didn't have to take the test. The prince casually reveals that Anna didn't need to because she helped write the test questions with Scroll. Nightingale is stunned to hear this, but then she asks about Tilly. Why didn't she have to take the test? The prince explains that Tilly was responsible for reviewing the test beforehand to make sure there weren't any errors, and she aced it with a perfect score. This revelation throws Nightingale even deeper into despair. The prince reflects on the exam results, noting how much the Slumber Island witches have improved. Evelyn and Sylvie both passed, with Evelyn making the most impressive leap, raising her score from 5 to 62. Even though she still scored the lowest of the three, he can see she put in a lot of hard work. However, it's a different story for the three new battle witches, whose scores are all quite low. None of them managed to pass the 50-point mark. He figures it's because they didn't attend most of the classes, and their language skills were particularly lacking compared to other subjects. But Nightingale fares even worse among them. Despite studying with everyone else, her scores are even lower than last time. The prince muses that maybe she's just not cut out for academics. I can't help but think about how Nightingale has one of the most badass abilities among all the witches. I sometimes wonder what her powers might look like if she evolves. Anyway, Prince laments how she barely got anything right on the math and science parts. Her formulas were completely off. But somehow she nearly nailed the multiple choice and true-false questions, which is a mystery Roland couldn't figure out. Later we see Maggie cracking open an egg, and her lucky star shines so bright that she gets 2 yolks from 1 egg. Even Sister Lightning feels a little jealous about that. The next scene transitions to the Holy City, where we find Pope Main in the underground jail. As he approaches one of the cells, he reflects on how the last time he was here, it was to execute the previous king, Wimbledon. This time, though, he's here because of Zero. Once he enters, he asks her how the disciplinary whip feels and hopes she understands what it means to obey him after this. She teasingly asks him if by obey he means her obedience to him specifically, or if he expects her to be courteous to the other archbishops as well. Pope Main makes it clear that she will need to fulfill his commands, and if he needs her to help the other archbishops with their tasks, she'll have to listen to them. She readily agrees, saying she'll do as he says. At that moment, he tells the soldiers to release her handcuffs. Once they're off, he informs her that he has a mission for her and asks her to come with him. He reveals that the months of demons might last for 5 this year, posing a great challenge for the Holy City and even worse for other areas. He wants her and the other pure witches to leave for Grey Castle and assassinate the rebels Timothy and Roland Wimbledon while everything is still chaotic. Zero just snickers faintly, which angers Main, and he asks her if those whips weren't enough to tame her. Right at that moment, a light begins to shine brightly in her chest, and Main finds himself transported to the old Holy City, the time when he first became a follower of the church. The fact that Main landed in this place reveals that it holds the most memorable moments for him, which Zero finds quite fascinating. He asks her why she's crossing the line by using her powers on him, to which Zero simply shrugs and says she's well aware of what she's doing. But she reminds him that since they are in the world of mind, they have more time than they could ever use, and there is something she wants to explain to him slowly. Of course, Main already knows that this place is a battlefield of souls, where victims fight their invaders within their consciousness. The winner takes all, and the loser takes the fall. It's a rare type of summoning, almost unavoidable without the stone's protection. But even though he's wearing the stone, Main is frustrated to see that her powers still work on him. Zero snickers and asks him if he's thinking about his stone, explaining that its effectiveness has been erased. She finds it amusing how mortals can't tell the difference between whether the stone they're wearing is still effective or not. Main grits his teeth when he realizes this must be Isabella's doing. He knew from the start that these two were unreliable, and he's frustrated with himself for not using them to produce divine punishment soldiers when he became pope. Anyway, he asks her when she removed the stone's effectiveness. Zero reminds her that he had locked her behind the bars, so how would she knows? Main tries to keep his cool and asks her if what she's doing is revenge for him punching her. He reminds her that even if she kills him, the entire Hermes base is surrounded by stones, leaving her nowhere to run. Once he returns to reality, she'll be detected by the divine punishment soldiers and captured. When they interrogate her, she'll realize that the punishment she's gone through is just child's play. Zero snickers and lets him know that she isn't planning to escape. Instead, she wants to take his place and become the pope. Main calls her way of thinking ridiculous and reminds her that he is the one who is trusted by their followers and the masses. It's funny how she thinks they would recognize her position if she killed him. She then reveals to him that she doesn't have to show herself. She can just be the Pope's messenger. O'Brien always stayed in the temple and wore a mask when he went out, so no one would ever notice there was a different Pope. But Main reminds her that she won't be able to hide it. Once the divine punishment soldiers see him missing, she'll be captured right away. He's sure it's not too late to release him, and she will let her off the hook. The girl approaches him and reminds him that once the battle of souls begins, there's no stopping it. Maine gets more annoyed with each ticking second. When he asks her what she exactly wants, she tells him that even giving up would be a wise choice. These words strike Maine hard because they're exactly what the previous pope had told him. It seems like the former pope already knew this was going to happen. To clear up any lingering doubts, Zero also claims that the previous pope had arranged this battlefield for them. Once it ends, the one who is still alive will become the real ruler of the church.